Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. Today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey through the recent releases made by the Criterion collection during this year, 2020. And I'd like to focus, if I may, on a film which can be found on the magnificent set released by Criterion, which is called Martin Scorsese's World Cinema Project Number 3. This film in particular is designated spy number 1046. This is from 1954, and the filmmaker is Usmar Ismail. This is the film from Indonesia called Lewat Jam Malam, or in English, After the Curfew. Film Lewat Jam Malam, or After the Curfew, from 1954, is the work from the great artist Usmar Ismail, and it depicts a young man who is returning to society after returning from the army, from military service. And this film, in essence, shows his attempts at trying to integrate or reintegrate himself into the post-war society of Indonesia, and also the way in which he is encountering the various expressions of so-called economic progress that we see in various forms throughout the film. And his efforts or his struggles with this, combined with his interactions with certain family members, as well as former military personnel who used to be with him, and how this notion of a prior revolutionary spirit has its place or doesn't have its place in the new economic climate of 1950s Indonesia, and what is required in terms of what might be deemed to be the necessity for an economic pragmatism going forward. This is at the heart of what is going on, I feel, in After the Curfew, and the hero's struggle and what choices he ends up making that form the backbone of this extraordinary work of art from Usmar Ismail from 1954. I am not declaring myself to be in any way, shape, or form an expert when it comes to Indonesian history and politics. However, I do appreciate and understand very basic points that are relevant to this film. And I think thanks in large part to the materials that can be found in the booklet, and also in the supplement materials that are found together with this film on the Criterion collection. And I will speak to those momentarily. But if I could, I think some aspects are well worth keeping in mind when we watch this film, which is the idea of the nation and spirit of Indonesia that is existing in this climate of the early 1950s. And this is very significant too, because this is after the war, and this is also after two very significant dates, which is 1945 and 1949. And to be very basic about it, these are two significant dates in terms of the expression and finalization and confirmation of what might be deemed, or what is deemed to be, independence from Dutch rule and Dutch control. And thus we have the spirit of the revolution that is very important during this time, and thus is the idea that is lingering in the air most unmistakably, and is in the atmosphere of this film in the immediate post-war aftermath. And thus we have one of the basic foundations of the film, which is the notion of the revolutionary spirit, and how that revolutionary spirit can or cannot adjust to the necessity of a post-war 1950s economic pragmatism and so-called economic progress. What is the place of this revolutionary spirit in the context of this 1950s society? Is it at all possible for what might be deemed to be a pure moral revolutionary spirit to coincide peacefully with the economic pragmatic needs of a society that is really driven by the economic engines? So these questions are at the heart on a broad level in this film, and they are expressed very intimately in our hero's journey. And we see him trying to integrate himself into society, trying to make a living, trying to adjust to the new world realities that he faces. And one of the things that does come up, and that is one of the dilemmas of the post-revolution spirit, is what to do afterwards. Now what? Right? That is the question. Now what? We have achieved independence. Now what? What is the way forward? And this is another deeply existential question that is at the heart of all revolution. And the answers are always very localized, but they also have a universal sense in the difficulties of the application and maintenance of authority and power, such that we get a number of possibilities going forward. One, we might have the situation of economic turmoil, and because of the economic engines not necessarily being able to run in a way that is necessary for the sustenance of a post-war society. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is power vacuums. And in the existence of a power vacuum, what does that mean in terms of existing power structures and other outlying institutionalized forms that want to get into power? And this brings into question the notion of the militarization of ruling bodies. And so this is also a question that is, I think, at the heart of Indonesian politics during this time, and is certainly in the air when we speak about after the curfew and the notion of how the military is being depicted here, how it's being depicted in terms of flashback, and also how it's being depicted in terms of the moment, and how these two depictions might seem to be very different from each other. And so this is the idea of the power vacuum and the potential for military control. And the other thing, too, is the notion, I think, which is very similar, which is the idea of corruption. And because the only way forward is for a certain powerful elite to emerge, or the idea of corruption, which will lead to the advancement of those who are able to take advantage of the roots of corruption. And so how do these aspects figure in to what was originally there during the revolution? Are these concepts mutually exclusive, or in fact what might be even more nuanced and complex and perhaps even disturbing, depending on your point of view, is perhaps are these notions much more related initially than we might want to think. And that kind of nuance is also at play very vividly in this work After the Curfew. There's another thing at play too, which is a sense of the individual versus society, or I use the word versus, I should say individualism in the context of society. And the phrase society, I think, is being depicted in this story in many different ways. A society that is a post-war one, that is based on ambitions and dreams of capitalistic complacency, and the household and the family unit. And those, I think, are really important concepts that are at play here and that are being depicted as in terms of possibilities going forward. And the other versions of society are more akin to, say, an oligarchical view of certain power elites, or the emerging ruling class, and how that ruling class is defined and established. And here we have certain characters from our protagonist's past, and from the past military relationships, and how certain people that he knew from the past are perhaps taking advantage of certain economic situations that were confronted or that were made available to them. And so this kind of network or oligarchical structure, I think, is another depiction of society. And that in turn, that network depiction also is a very indirect way of depicting the notion of government authority and government bodies, and the ideas of how these structures are inherently embedded in the institutionalized structures that are really working towards a redevelopment or reorganization or restructuring on economic and social terms in the 1950s. And we see these power plays and operating of relationships and networking very vividly in the film itself. I mean, it's one of the direct aspects of the plot. How is our hero going to survive? What kind of job can he get? And how can networking land him a nice position somewhere? And who does he know that can help him? And what is also interesting is perhaps these positions aren't as morally acceptable as our hero might be willing to accept. And so that also leads to some very deeply troubling moral questions about the nature of power and the nature of economic progress, and what is really being involved here when it comes to this kind of thing, and what is at stake, and what are the risks to the individual spirit, and what are the stakes, and what is the cost that is incurred when you have this individual spirit, shall we say, that might be said to be at odds with these depictions of societal structures that are at the heart of this film After the Curfew. And so I think, I mean, at least as I see it, and as I say, I'm looking at it also from the vantage point of someone who is a complete novice when it comes to Indonesian history and politics. That being said, this does depict very vividly these kinds of themes in a way that is artistically brilliant, that has a real sense of style and purpose in depicting its character, that has great concepts and capturing of the essence of acting and method, that has also a sense of what might be deemed to be a almost rugged docudrama type of feel. Some might use the term neo-realism, but there is a sense of the immediate economic struggle that is being depicted by a number of the characters here, and I think that has to do with class, emerging class structures. That has also to do with the application of military power, and also that has to do with the application of economic restructuring engines, and what people are willing to do in order to get ahead, and what our main character is willing or is not willing to do in that context. And so I think it is all here made very bare and very potent in the story. And so therefore we have a story that is immediate and intimate in terms of a drama, but also speaks to a very broad and very macro portrait of this period of Indonesian politics and society in the early 1950s. What a remarkable achievement. And it is raw, it is emotional, it is moving, it is melodramatic in the best possible sense. It is tense, it's suspenseful. There are moments of music, and it has a sense of the dramatic and the operatic, which is also a very important concept. This has the feeling of opera, and it is also something that is, I think, capturing a realist type of dilemma in terms of society and politics. And so that mix of dramatic tones is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And one needs to be a genius artist to be able to pull this off in grand cinematic terms, the way that Ismail does. And he does it so well in this film, After the Curfew. So this is 1954's brilliant work, After the Curfew, Lewat Jam Malam. And speaking of this film, as I say, it is included as part of the brilliant set, which is right here, Martin Scorsese's World Cinema Project number 3, and it is at spine number 1046. It is a dual format edition, so you get the DVD version and you also get the Blu-ray version as well, Region A or Zone 1. And included in this, well, first of all, it is a restored version and it looks great. I mean, for the most part, there are the occasional noticeable aspects of film damage, but it's not in any way to the extent that it makes the image imperceptible. It's just, I think this is really gorgeous looking, and it sounds great and crisp, and it's a really sight to behold. And then as far as the supplements are concerned, we have the Martin Scorsese introduction, which is approximately 3 minutes. And this Martin Scorsese introduction is, again, a wonderful primer. It has no spoilers, but it goes into the basic thematic structures of the film, and also Usmar Ismail as a filmmaker and artist. So it's a great way to get into this film prior to watching it. And then we have a 19-minute one-on-one interview with Indonesian film expert J.B. Kristanto. And this is essential viewing for anyone who is seeking a further appreciation and understanding of the cinema of Indonesia, and also Usmar Ismail, and also the making of After the Curfew, and specific aspects of the production, the actors, certain themes and presentations, the importance of music and theater and opera. That comes up. Kristanto makes a great point about that as an example. And also the importance of history and politics and the depiction of such, and why all these reasons and more are why Kristanto and others believe this film to be really an exemplar, a truly exceptional work of art of the cinema of Indonesia. And what he says is incredibly convincing and wonderfully insightful and incredibly remarkable. So I recommend this so much for anyone who might be interested in a further exploration of this film and also other works from Indonesia. And then we have the booklet, and this booklet is outstanding. absolutely outstanding. The booklets from the WCP sets are always great, but this is another great example. First, on page 3, we have the cast and crew breakdown of the film, which is right here, and then we have the essay, which is focusing on after the curfew, starting on page 28. This is by Adrian Jonathan Pasaribu, and this is A Nation of Dead Ends. And this essay is incredibly insightful. I love this essay very much, and it goes through and it discusses these ideas and expresses them much better than I in terms of the post-war economic reconstruction, the need for pragmatic viewpoints that could be leading to avenues of corruption, the possibility and the possibility of possible military intervention and a kind of militaristic rule in the wake of a power vacuum, and the revolutionary spirit and how that is very important to the characters of this film and also to Ismail as a filmmaker himself, and the ideas of individualism and society, and also how the film, from the viewpoint of the essayist, how the film either treats that theme very well, or perhaps it does so in lieu of maybe other possibilities and options as far as the presentation of a thesis on pragmatic political possibilities going forward. And so I think there's a lot of stuff to sink one's teeth into and to really ponder and enjoy and contemplate, and so much more. This essay, A Nation of Dead Ends, is spectacular, and I recommend it wholeheartedly for anyone who might be interested. Once again, it is in this fantastic book. So that is the film After the Curfew, and I must say once again that it is an exceptional example of cinema at its finest, and it holds some deep universal truths that I think are very accessible and can be understood by anyone who watches this film. So it's one of these things where we see a localized and a very specific time and place being depicted, and yet what we also see in this observation of a time and place is something universal, and something that I think can touch us all in many different ways. And that is the power of this film, and that is the power of cinema as a whole. So this is the great work, which is called After the Curfew. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your precious time, my dear friends, and cheers.